The amount of illogicality is genuinely shocking, quite a difference when we compare the game's models to how they would look in reality. This is some Call of Duty Vanguard level fiction. We begin with a cutscene introducing us to our character, Sergeant Jack Barnes, a paratrooper from the US 101st Airborne Division, 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment.
Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied forces are about to launch the biggest offensive in the history of modern warfare. Its code name, Operation Overlord.
The biggest military offensive in history was the German Operation Barbarossa invasion of the USSR, not the Allied Operation Overlord invasion of Europe. It could be argued that Barnes would have not been made aware of how extensive Operation Barbarossa was at this time, though he does admit to knowing the level of Soviet casualties on the Eastern Front in a later cutscene.
From what we've heard, the Soviets have their own heavy axe to grind with the fatherland. Something about 20 million dead.
Either way, we are not here to play devil's advocate, but to talk facts. The first chapter brings us to the D-Day June 6, 1944 paradrops into Normandy, France. The opening text states our C-47 Skytrain is flying at a height of 3,000 feet. This is ridiculously high, as the intended drop height for US paratroopers was around 700 feet, and under flak fire they'd often jump lower than that. When we enter the gameplay, we straight away notice a major inaccuracy. There are British paratroopers of the 6th Airborne Division in our aircraft. American and British paratroopers did not drop together. In reality, the British drop zones were 80 kilometers to the east of the Americans. The US Airborne M42 uniforms are poorly done and lack CC2 gas impregnation, which made them look darker. Their webbing are basic infantry ones rather than the airborne ones with the shoulder pads. Where their cartridge belt's first aid pouch should hang are what look to be elongated compass pouches worn only by commanding officers. None of the paratroopers have any rank insignia, meaning they are all apparently privates. None of the troops wear any helmet chin straps. They absolutely would when jumping. And they are missing numerous gear items that they would definitely have at this initial jumping phase. These include yellow life vests and cavalry gloves, reserve parachutes, haversacks, rubberized M7 gas mask bags, and leg bags for their weapons. The British paratroopers look even worse. Their base uniforms are just badly retextured American M42s, instead of the proper Davidson smocks worn over battle dress uniforms, as represented here with an art piece using the game's models by Michael Akkerman. Their headgear consists of either American M1 helmets or red berets. When jumping and in combat, they should be wearing the HSAT. Curiously, a 2D texture of a pistol holster was added to all of them. It would only really be officers and specialized paratroopers that would carry sidearms in the British Airborne. Their web gear is also just carried over from the American paratroopers, including these weird misshapen mazette bags. In reality, they would have the British Pattern 37 web equipment. And they are also missing jump gear, such as the oversmocks and leg bags. Almost all of the vehicles in-game, including the C-47s, lack specific unit markings and serial numbers. The distance between us and our parachute canopy is way too short. It and all the other canopies are also white, when there should be a mix with the camo ones. This is probably one of the most over-exaggerated video game portrayals of the airborne landings on D-Day, with troopers falling to their deaths, C-47s crashing into each other, and the players smashing through the roof of a barn. The American airlift received a significant amount of flak fire, and some pilots panicked, but nothing near this amount of chaos actually happened. It is never specified exactly where in Normandy we are. Looking at the surroundings of the maps does not help either, as they are all just fictional. The flat terrain, lack of hedgerows, as well as the presence of these windmills and the large bridge over a wide river we have to secure at the end, makes the place actually resemble more like the Netherlands than anywhere in Normandy. Our M1 Garand is apparently strapped to us, as we can equip it straight after cutting ourselves free from the harness. It should be in our leg bag, that in this case would likely still be on the rooftop, or disconnected and slid down the sides. The M1 Garand's operating rod is too big, the rear sight is sunk into the receiver, and the front sight is incorrectly shaped. We do not see any ammo or much detailing at all in the magazines or chambers of any of the weapons. As is common in video games, all of the fired bullets are brightly visible in the air as if they have tracers. We start with only 24 rounds or 3 clips of ammo for our M1 rifle. Paratroopers would carry at least 10 clips in reality, and probably more since they'd load themselves to the brim for the jump. Just like in the base game, each class of firearm all share the same ammo regardless of their caliber, meaning we use German bullets in allied weapons despite mostly being completely incompatible in reality. The M1911A1 does not have a trigger, and the right side of the gun is mostly mirrored to the left, meaning the mag release, slide stop and safety parts are also absent. The hammer is always stuck in the uncocked position, and when the gun is empty, the slide locks back, goes back to the forward position and then back to the rear again for some reason. The Mark II frags are missing their coloured rings, indicating that they may have been modelled on inert training grenades. We do not actually remove the pins of the Mark II grenades, with the spoons also still being attached when thrown, which would mean they should not explode. We can tell by our sleeves that our character is wearing a woolen M41 field jacket, instead of the correct M42 paratrooper jacket. All of the enemy soldiers are heard speaking German only. The army or Heer forces the Allies faced here were primarily of static infantry divisions, namely the 709th and 716th. These units consisted largely of Osttruppen, foreign volunteers and conscripts, particularly from the countries of Georgia, Russia and Ukraine. Instead of just being standard Germans, many of them should be heard speaking those Eastern European languages and be wearing the unique uniform insignia that Osttruppen had, as shown here with another art piece by Akkerman. The base uniform of the enlisted Heer soldiers across this expansion pack is a green shade of M42 with incorrectly contrasting stone grey tunic collars and shoulder straps. Although the M42 was still in use, we should also find the M36, M40, Summer M42 HVT, M43, and for the later levels M44 uniforms mixed in with them too in different shades of Felgrau. Just like the paratroopers, none of the enlisted Germans have any rank insignia or commendations, meaning that they are all apparently fresh privates. Their Stahlhelms appear to be the pre- and early war ones, judging by the green colour and decals. They should mostly be the standard grey ones without decals, as those stopped being put on them by this stage. Besides that, the decals are the same eagle on both sides, when they should be two different ones or just a single one. Since the German soldiers here were of rearguard static divisions, they could store most of their equipment locally and would only carry the essentials on them when on duty. In the game, all of the Germans wear Y straps, most of whom with full loads of gear including mess kits and so on. We do see some without all the equipment, though they have the opposite problem by completely lacking the essentials of headgear and ammo pouches. The vast majority of the Germans are wearing jackboots, while the few that wear the then more widespread low boots actually just have cut down jackboots without any gaiters. Far too many of the enlisted ranked Germans are armed with MP40s. Only NCOs, officers and sometimes assistant squad leaders would carry these. The MP40 is completely missing a trigger, bolt handle, safety notch in the receiver and the front sight post. The spent casings are ejecting from the back of the receiver instead of from the ejection port towards the front. The inventory allows us to carry multiple primary weapons, and in some of the levels the game even gives us numerous primary weapons by default. Real soldiers did not do this in World War II as it would just be dead weight. We should have one primary weapon, which for a sergeant would be either a M1 Garand or M1A1 Thompson. The Model 24 steel hand granata is used but not actually physically carried by the Germans as their only concussive or fragmentation grenade in the game, despite the fact that the Model 39 eye-hand granata was actually the most produced German grenade of World War II. The steel hand granata still have their safety caps attached when thrown, so should not explode. American M1910 canteens with red crosses on them are rather illogically dropped by the Germans and found around their supplies as health packs. Immediately after leaving the barn we landed in, Ju-87 Stukas attack our position. The paradrops have just begun. Enemy aircraft would not have yet been deployed. The aircraft are also constantly seen flying at ridiculously low altitudes. We encounter this game's version of Waffen-SS soldiers. There were no SS forces stationed at any of the Allied airborne drop zones in Normandy. These SS soldiers are wearing a poorly depicted smock with a completely ahistorical camo pattern. It would be a properly camouflaged M42 smock that was mostly worn by the Waffen-SS at this time period. Their collar insignia consists of Heer Litzen instead of the SS collar tabs. They have Heer infantry visor caps in place of the SS ones with the Totenkopf skull. And these visor caps are worn by every single one of them, meaning they apparently are all officers. Realistically, helmets would just be worn in combat over caps anyway. We subsequently run into enemies that the wiki claims to be Panzer Grenadiers. They are wearing a very oversized Zeltbahn in splitter camo. The camo itself is also oversized and in the wrong colour shades. Moreover, while it was a common choice of camo clothing at the time, the mixture of splitter tarn Muster together with those with SS camo is odd, seeing as the former was a choice of ground sheet for Wehrmacht troops, and the SS would use Eichenlaub Muster or Platonen Muster. All of the anti-aircraft guns are seen being used by regular infantry. Instead, they should be operated by Luftwaffe ground flak forces. The 2cm flak-bearing 38 was box magazine fed and required a crew of up to 5 to properly load, aim and fire. In game, we just used them by ourselves with unlimited ammo and no reload animation. The flak-bearing 38s also lack components, such as the base or concrete stand or wheel stand underneath them. The Opel Blitz trucks have the desert paint scheme and Africa Corps symbols on them. The machine guns are seen being operated by just one soldier, when they would have a crew with an assistant and ammunition carrier. None of the Germans manning MGs have any specific machine gunner equipment that they should carry under web gear, like the MG Tasha, cleaning kit and pistol. The model for the MG42 in the base game was serviceable, but for some reason it is way worse quality in this expansion. Parts of the iron sights are missing, and so are many of the vent holes on the barrel shroud. The MG42 has no ammo feeding into it, yet still somehow fires endlessly with no animations for reloads, cooldowns or barrel changes. The MG42's fire rate is way too slow. This is what we hear in game. Versus reality. The MG42 appears as the only machine gun used by the Germans in the game, although of course in use. Due to Germany's main forces before June of 1944 being the Eastern Front and the Mediterranean, state-of-the-art weapons like the MG42 tended to go to those fronts rather than rearguard units in places like Normandy. Most of the machine guns here would be older ones, mainly the MG34, in addition to others like captured French, Polish, Soviet or Czech machine guns. We encounter a Panzerwerfer. There were barely any armoured vehicles in this area around Normandy, let alone a rare vehicle like this. The few Panzerwerfers in Normandy wouldn't arrive until several days after D-Day, and they only saw service in the British sector. Tiger tank! That is not a Tiger tank, but a Panzer IV. This could actually be considered accurate, as soldiers misidentifying such tanks as Tigers was a characteristic of the Western Front. Regardless, there should not yet be any Panzer IVs here at all. The 1st German armour engaged the American airborne in the early morning and consisted of outdated and foreign tanks, not Panzer IVs during the first night. The Panzer IVs have the small vision slits on the right and left of the turrets, which were removed in April 1942. Their guns are the older L43, which would have been replaced by the newer L48 gun in April 1943. The tank has the incorrect black and yellow paint scheme from the base game's North Africa levels. They should be painted in Dunkelgelb with mixes of green and browns in different patterns such as dot, line or ambush types. None of the German or American tanks have any roof-mounted machine guns, and they for some reason never use their hull-mounted MGs, which they absolutely should when encountering enemy foot soldiers. Apparently this Panzer IV is made of cardboard, since we somehow destroy it by shooting it with a 20mm flak gun a few times. In typical video game fanfare, all of the tanks completely blow up and turn into charred, distorted wrecks when destroyed. The same thing happens to the unarmoured vehicles. Only something like an ammunition explosion could cause such a large blast as this, and those were not all that common.
Wilson, get Barnes here a weapon.
We already have an M1 Garand and M1911A1. Why would we need British weapons? They give us a Lee Enfield rifle, Sten SMG and Webley revolver in addition to mill bombs and smoke grenades. Why would they have so many spare weapons that they are willing to give away? This would not happen and is clearly just a game trying to shoehorn further weapon diversity upon the player. Captain Foxhound is seen using an American SCR-536 walkie-talkie. If they wanted to depict a radio conversation in the field here, then he should be using a British radio like the No. 38 Mark II wireless set.
Jerry's scrambling to reinforce artillery divisions north of you.
There were no entire artillery divisions in Normandy. The only artillery forces in the region were divided over many batteries, and didn't scramble to meet the invaders. This is just Medal of Honor throwing around imposing terminology to make stuff sound interesting.
They're utilizing a bridge in your area, held by a Colonel Hildebrandt. Your mission is to eliminate the Colonel and destroy that bridge.
Like all of the other characters in this expansion, Colonel Hildebrandt is fictional, and so is this objective of going after him and his bridge. It does not even make any military sense to have a colonel, the leader of a regiment, hold a single bridge. Despite being referred to as a colonel here, when we then meet Hildebrandt, we see he wears lieutenant shoulder boards with a unit number of 26. Also, if he and his men are artillery forces, then they should have the red piping or Waffenfarbe on their uniforms instead of the infantry white.
Reports indicate the span is heavily defended, but your orders are to succeed at all costs.
What is the point of this conversation other than being a bad plot device for the player? The limited range of the SCR-536 would mean that he has to be talking to some CO in the field, but why would he? These troops would have already been fully briefed on their mission objectives before landing. They would not be told just now. Also, a total of 4 allied paratroopers would not be enough for such a mission. We would definitely want to link up with more troops before doing this. Although likely prompted by technical limitations, the lack of allies is a constant problem in this game.
Roger that. Over and out.
Over and out is a common Hollywood erroneous term for radio use. Standard radio procedure would see one just say out when ending the transmission with no response expected.
Sergeant, you're on point. Let's move.
Hold on, not only did these British soldiers incorrectly drop with US paratroopers, not bother looking for any more of their allies, and for some reason give us their weapons, but they are now putting us, an American sergeant, on point of their section's mission, which we for some reason go along with. No, we would have our own objectives and squad mates to take care of. The level of illogicality here is genuinely shocking. It is extremely clear that the developers wanted to depict the British airborne perspective of D-Day, but if so, then why not just make us a British paratrooper? Why go through all of this nonsense of trying to shoehorn them in with Americans? The Sten Mark V is incorrectly called a Sten Mark II in the HUD. Parts including the rear peep sight, foregrip and barrel sleeve latch and spring are missing. It is depicted as a closed bolt weapon when it should be open bolt, with the bolt itself also being static and stuck in the forward position even after doing the motion to pull it back. And the spent casings are ejecting from the back of the receiver instead of from the ejection port further to the front. The strikers of all bolt action rifles in game are incorrectly static. Every clip-fed rifle is always reloaded with the maximum capacity of rounds, even if there is ammo still in the magazine. And when loading the clips, we shove in the clips themselves, which would need to be removed. The smoke grenades the British have given us are American M18s. Proper British equivalents would include the number 77 bursting, number 79 emission, and number 80 bursting smoke grenades. The M18 smoke grenades are the post-war version with the green body and white writing. World War II M18s had yellow writing on a grey body. The M18s also lack the coloured tops that identify the colour of the smoke emitted. All of the smoke grenades in game only emit smoke for a few seconds, when they would last upwards of minutes in reality depending on the model. The game follows the Hollywood trope of having the Reichsadler and other such markings on all of the German crates. In fact, these big ones here are directly modelled on the Ark of the Covenant's container in Indiana Jones. Most World War II German munition crates in actuality would just have what's inside them stenciled on the outside. We find tin cans with a ribbed aluminium design which were not introduced until after World War II. We start to encounter an unrealistically high amount of Heer officers. Every one of them wore M36 tunics with the exact same commendations and rank insignia as well as breeches featuring red lampessen, meaning that they are all in the general staff. Yeah, I don't think so. We also begin running into Heer soldiers wearing earlier versions of field caps that are missing the roundels. The British are seen using American Mark II grenades instead of the Milsvam. Many of the flak guns are illogically placed. For instance, here is a whole flak 88 located inside a barn. While yes, you could try hide it in there and have the barrel sticking out of the building, but that is not really the case here. The concussion of the gun going off would knock out every crew member cold within such a confined space, and maybe even knock down the barn itself. This also greatly limits the field of fire this flak has. It's just stupid. Instead of properly setting them up with the blasting cap and detonator, the American TNT charges somehow explode by just having what appears to be attached blasting machines with the detonator handles missing. We see an armoured locomotive from a BP-44 Panzerzug. This had just started being made in mid-1944 and was never in Normandy on this night. Also, typically BP-44s were coupled with several Panzer III Wagen, Panzer Spa Wagen, and Panzer Jagerwagen, as they were mobile fortresses equipped with enough firepower to take on enemy positions or reinforced areas. Its locomotive would not be used to transport a few freight cars and flatbeds like a standard cargo train. The British use American TNT charges. A British explosive like the number 82 grenade, also known as the Gammon bomb, would be more suitable. Colonel Hildebrandt's motorcycle has both a Wehrmacht and SS license plate on it for some reason. Oh great, actual Tiger tanks. Just like the Flak 38s, the Flak 88s are single-handedly fired endlessly by our character with no proper reload animation.
Right on time. That's That's our supply drop.
Supply drops did take place in the early morning on D-Day, but it happened on a massive scale with huge airdrops and glider landings, not with just a single plane that somehow knows exactly where we are. There is an out-of-place German first aid kit in the Allied supply crate. We find Turnister Empfänger EB radios in the German barracks, but they are always missing their additional storage unit for the battery, cables and spare parts, with them instead being shown equipped with microphones, which makes no sense considering these are radio receivers that cannot broadcast audio. On the fictional bridge are a couple of invulnerable soldiers using STG-44s. German doctrine only handed the STG-44 to assault troops on the front lines, not rearguard units. Similar to the MG-42, there would be a lot more older and foreign captured rifles and SMGs among these static units here over anything as new as the STG-44. This video is brought to you by Manscaped. When it comes to your grooming, there is no better opportunity to up your game than with Manscaped's bundled Beard Hedger and Lawnmower 5 Ultra electronic trimmers. The beard trimmer is built with the highest of quality, featuring a titanium coated stainless steel T-blade, with 20 different length options selected effortlessly with the zoom wheel. The Lawnmower 5 Ultra is not just your average body trimmer either, being equipped with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, foil blades, 3 different comb options and even an inbuilt dual LED spotlight. Both of these razors are waterproof, completely wireless and have up to 60 minutes of runtime on a single charge, all to give you the most convenient, controlled and smooth shave. So after finishing this video, bundle up and save 15% off your entire order by using code THEFROSTY with the links below to manscaped.com. Now, back to the inaccuracies. We are brought to December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes forest of Belgium. The weather throughout this chapter is very overcast and snowy with extremely limited visibility. By this mission's date of December 24th, the heavy cloud cover had already lifted over the Ardennes and there were clear skies. The airborne troopers are wearing the regular infantry HBT green uniforms that the US Rangers had in the base game, but with a snowy texture placed over it. We can even still see the Ranger Battalion insignia beneath. The correct uniform for them to have would be the airborne M43. The M1928 haversacks these soldiers have are undersized, and their first aid pouches incorrectly have belts instead of buttons. The medics lack standard gear items encompassing the medical bag and extra canteen. They also all have the same symmetrical Red Cross markings on their helmets, when there should be a lot more variation due to the medics applying these to their helmets themselves. We see African American troops mixed in with white soldiers. The African American 333rd and 969th Battalions did support the 101st Airborne Division during the Battle of the Bulge, but they were both segregated black-only artillery units. The US military did not fully integrate until after World War II. Throughout most of the chapter, our squad consists of a total of 4 soldiers, one of whom is a medic. A US Airborne Rifle Squad in reality consisted of 12 troops, and there would be numerous other squads partaking in the types of assaults we undergo. This was again likely not depicted due to technical, gameplay and or narrative reasons, but it is still evidently wrong. The M1A1 Thompson has an exaggerated blue finish on the metal body, while the wooden components exhibit a more cherry-like reddish tone. The left side of the lower receiver is a mirrored image of the right, resulting in the mag release, safety and fire rate switches being absent. And the bolt actuator on the Thompson is merely a flat texture that remains in the closed position even after the movement to retract it. All of the Germans outside in the snow wear white camouflage parkas and helmet covers. Although some did have these, they would more commonly just be wearing their issued greatcoats in winter conditions. Apparently some of the German parkas have picked up smallpox because they have these weird ahistorical camo dots all over them. It does not match up that there are Naval-Werfer 41 rocket launchers in the middle of nowhere here. These weapons would be used in batteries behind German lines as indirect artillery pieces. The Germans, as well as our character, fired the Naval-Werfer while standing directly behind it. Doing this would incinerate the user from the backblast. Naval-Werfers were fired remotely from a distance using a wire. Because video game, the Naval-Werfer is fired by just one person with unlimited rockets and no proper reload animation. The gun shield on the MG of the SDKSZ 251 half-track is much too large. This would be its actual size. The half-track features the decal of the 1st SS Panzer Division. This unit did not participate in the siege of Bastogne. They only arrived in the sector after the siege was lifted. We have to fire the naval Werfer at the half-track, which takes multiple shots to destroy. These fired 150mm rockets at a minimum firing range of 300 meters. One shot fired at this distance and everyone in this engagement, including the half-track, would be turned to jelly.
Okay, Sergeant. Here's the sticky bombs.
Back at it again, using movies like Saving Private Ryan as a historical source. Brilliant. The US never adopted any sticky explosives during World War II. Such a thing as this would be difficult to use since it would stick to the user's hands, clothes and so on. The only sticky bombs adopted by the Allies was the British No. 72 anti-tank grenade that came with a non-stick handle and cover. But even this was already outdated by now and of course was never used by the Americans. We begin to encounter these wooden watchtowers topped with snipers, searchlights or machine guns. This is the type of structure you would expect to find around a prison camp, not randomly out in the Ardennes forest. The Gewehr 43's bolt is always stuck closed even when firing or doing an empty reload. Its ZF4 scope has an incorrect fine cross reticle instead of the proper German No. 1 or 4 reticle. The Gewehr 43 was able to feed from both magazines and clips. However, magazines were increasingly scarce in the last years of the war. Consequently, 5-round clips were used more. While magazines were still utilized, each soldier should have 2 magazines and 2 to 5 clips rather than only mags as shown in the game. Because I guess adding an appropriate tanker model using a mounted machine gun was too much effort, we are instead presented with an MP40 armed regular infantryman clipped into the roof of a Panzer IV. The Panzer IVs in this chapter have a plain green paint scheme that is still incorrect. The tanks should have the aforementioned base paint jobs and given the setting would generally be whitewashed. Throughout the chapter we are attacked by numerous German aircraft. While the Luftwaffe did perform mass bombing raids on Bastogne, fighter sorties like this were not flown due to the Allied air superiority over the area and how all the trees of the forest would make seeing ground targets difficult. The aircraft themselves are also Ju-87 Stukas. German doctrine at this time called for Stukas to be used only for night attacks. We attack a sizable gated German base fit with an alarm system and all. The Battle of the Bulge was an offensive operation by the Germans. They never had the resources, time or need to set up a whole military compound like this near Bastogne. A soldier runs out of a shed with a Panzerschreck to attack us. When we look at the shed he came from, it turns out to actually be an outhouse. Damn, that man was armed and ready to fight for his life in there. As goofy as this is, he and the many other troopers armed with the Panzerschreck should not be using it as an anti-personnel weapon, for it is an anti-tank rocket launcher. The next level's loading screen features a weird looking SDKZ 258, but with the 75mm howitzer purposely not drawn on. Despite this, the vehicle we steal and drive in the gameplay is an SDKZ 251. A 2.8cm Panzerbucha 41 is attached to the SDKZ 251, which is questionable at the very least. Only the 2517 was confirmed to have mounted a variety of small cannons to it, including the Pak-36. However, the 2517 is an engineering version of the 251, and was usually loaded with bridging equipment on its sides, none of which is seen in game. We single-handedly used the Panzerbucha 41 to fire unlimitedly at a way too fast fire rate as if it's an autocannon. In reality, it had to be reloaded after every shot and would typically have a crew to help in doing so, like any other such anti-tank gun. It can also traverse around a full 360 degrees, which was not possible in real life. The model of Sherman tank from the base game reappears abandoned in a ditch here. It has the same errors of its drivers and co-drivers' hatches being missing, and the area where the hatches should be are stretched out of proportion. The turret ring's protective metal splash cover is also too high. An excessive number of Panzerschrecks are utilized by the foes in the levels where we operate vehicles. The Panzerschreck wasn't even the most widely used German explosive launcher of World War II, since the Panzerfaust was way more common, yet is never featured in this game. The fired rockets have a too low velocity and spiral out of control after a certain distance. This would not happen as the rocket motor only lasts for a few seconds. After that, the rocket would just continue its trajectory and fall at an angle. There are way too many German tanks in this section. These wouldn't just be randomly driving around forests, but kept back for major attacks against the American lines. The vehicles engage way too close to each other. Doctrine would dictate the armor to spread out and fight at much further distances of hundreds of meters where possible. Such an extremely hectic engagement involving a small team of paratroopers stealing German vehicles and using them to destroy several tanks would surely have made headlines. An event like this never happened during the Battle of the Bulge. This is all fiction.
Hey, Shaney, how ticked do you think Jerry's gonna be when they hear their supplies got hijacked?
There are no recorded cases of raiding an enemy encampment to steal weapons during this battle. While the airborne forces were quite low on ammunition and supplies during the siege, equipping what seems to be an entire company of airborne troops solely with German weaponry is far-fetched. Not to mention there's no way one truck and maybe a half-track had enough weapons to fully equip the airborne forces here. The Walter P38 is missing its trigger. Its hammer is always stuck in the uncocked position, and its slide fails to lock back when firing or empty. Many parts of the Kart98K are absent, including the bolt takedown washer, stock sling cutout, trigger, floor plate, barrel bands, safety switch and rear sight. We are also provided with the Naval Kurzat 39B, a German smoke grenade that is very rarely depicted in media. It is incorrectly called a naval hand granata in the HUD. The model for the Naval Kurzat 39B is upside down. The grenade is shown emitting green smoke when it should be white or grey. The 101st captains are wearing khaki M41 uniforms, also with the Ranger insignia on them. They even still have assault vests from the Normandy Omaha Beach landings. Again, these should be M43s.
Cards! Pepper's hit! Hang on a second! I've done all I can for him. Let's go!
Wow, some medic you are. The STG-44 has a well-detailed model, but it is missing a trigger, and its iron sights do not align with those of the real weapon. We also do not press what the mag releases and just rip the mags out with brute force. In addition, our character always unnecessarily cocks the weapon when pulling it out, which fails to eject the chambered round. The artillery bombardment we received is followed by a large German infantry and armoured attack on our position. This level is set on Christmas Eve, December 24th. The big German assault against the 101st here did not occur until the following day, on Christmas itself. We are depicted defending trenches against hordes of enemies human wave charging at us as if it's the First World War. German World War II combined arms doctrine would see them using the cover of their surroundings and vehicles to approach. Although likely due to the game's age, the AI is being completely dumb tactically, and having very basic reload animations and unlimited ammo is evident throughout this game. As to be expected at this stage, the 8cm Granatwerfer 42 motors fire endlessly with no loading procedure. We also use the Granatwerfer 42 motors directly on the front lines way below its minimum effective distance. The angle they are aimed at should cause the motor rounds to be sent hundreds of meters away, but they instead just land a few meters in front of us. We get to use the Panzerschreck, giving us a better view at how its rear and front sights are missing, while its breech guard is an incorrect solid texture. When reloading, we just shove a rocket into the tube without connecting the wire to the contact leads for electrical ignition of the rocket motor. The reloading procedure is performed while we hold the launcher upright in front of us. Since a Panzerschreck measures 65 inches in length, and the typical World War II soldier's height was around 68 inches, reloading in this manner would likely cause the muzzle to be shoved into the ground. Factors such as these were the reason rocket launchers were used by a crew of 2 men, but this is not represented in the game. The following level brings us to Christmas morning, December 25th, and sees our American forces launch an assault on the Germans. It should be the other way around. This is the day the Germans launched a major assault on the Bastogne perimeter. The town we are attacking is just a fictional one that the game never clearly identifies. There were no villages or towns around the Bastogne perimeter that had to be taken by the Americans on the Christmas Day attack. All sniper variants of the Kart98K have what is assumedly an irregularly shaped Dow scope which is offset to the left. The centrally mounted ZF41 scope would be a more suitable choice. Despite literally being the same weapon, the unscoped and scoped versions of the Kart98K have a distinctly different firing sound. Outside one of the German-occupied buildings is a Winchester M1912. During World War II, this shotgun was only rarely used by the Americans in the Pacific and with the US Army Air Force and rear echelon forces. The M1912 lacks a front sight, with its magazine tube also extending past the area for the bayonet lug. In typical video game logic, the shotgun has a ridiculously low damage range. While shooting down Stukas, we hear the iconic Jericho trumpets. Jericho trumpets were removed from service years earlier in the war. The game then brings us to the Battle of Berlin around what the wiki and depicted events indicate to be April 30th, 1945. Okay, surely they will change your perspective to a Red Army soldier for this, you're probably thinking, but no. No. Instead, our M41 field jacket wearing 101st Airborne American Sergeant Barnes is completely inexplicably placed on the Eastern Front to help the Soviets and secure some documents on a double agent. Why? Just why? This is some Call of Duty Vanguard level fiction. The Soviets at this point overwhelmingly outnumbered the remaining Germans and had the city surrounded. They did not need or want direct US infantry intervention in Berlin. The uniforms of the Red Army soldiers are a mess. Most of them completely lack field caps or helmets, while the few with headgear are actually just wearing brown retextured American M1s instead of the proper Soviet SSH helmets. The Soviet soldiers with the Chanel or greatcoats have the outdated red collar tabs instead of the newer subdued green ones. Under the greatcoats, we see they have reused German field grey pants tucked into low boots, in place of the Soviet khaki M43 pants and Kurtza boots. And they use PPSH-41 SMGs despite wearing rifle pouches only. The others mostly have no ammo pouches. In fact, all of the Soviets are missing standard web gear encompassing canteens, mess kits, shovels and rucksacks. The Soviet Navy Talyanska and belt buckle on one of the soldiers identify him as being a naval infantryman. His presence fighting here does not match up. There are no boats or other naval personnel present in the game, and the only Soviet naval unit within Berlin at this time were elements of the Dnieper flotilla that were busy operating their boats and supporting regular infantrymen, including helping them cross the Spree River. The naval infantryman has shoulder boards on his Tilugrica. The shoulder boards are poorly done Army Junior Sergeant ones instead of the Navy Petty Officer second class ones. In addition, he wears what seems to be a badly modelled medal for the victory over Germany in the Great Patriotic War, which was not awarded until the Battle of Berlin concluded. We can tell by the dark blue breeches, red collar insignia and gold shoulder boards that these Soviet junior lieutenant officers are wearing a ceremonial service and parade dress. They should instead have the standard khaki field M43 uniform. Our Soviet allies talk about the T-34 tank being new.
Ты видел новые Т-34? Ребята говорили о них. Серега сказал, что он уже водил.
T-34s were well in use since 1941, and the newer 85mm gun ones since 1943. These lads must have been living under the Siberian permafrost the whole time.
Barnes, one of your planes went down inside city. See if pilot alive and get papers he carries.
Thanks for telling us, Soviet comrade who for some reason speaks English, but there are no reports of Western Allied aircraft flying or crashing in Berlin during this time of the battle. This plot point is also fictitious. We unexplainably begin armed with a ridiculous amount of Soviet weaponry, including a Nagant 1895, Mosin Nagant, SVT-40, PPSH-41, as well as F1 and RDG-1 grenades. Our character never ejects the spent casings of the Nagant 1895 revolver, and somehow just clips new rounds in anyway when reloading. It is shown being reloaded while the hammer is cocked, which is not possible in real life as the cylinder would be locked in place. And at the end of the reload, the locking gate is not closed but simply disappears. The M9130 Mosin Nagant rifle is depicted with a bent bolt. Bent bolts were designed for sniper rifle variants of the Mosin fitted with the scope in 1941. The SVT-40's bolt and cleaning rod have been replaced by a wooden texture, with the trigger and mag release also being missing. The bolt handle is still there, though it is always stuck in a forward position even upon firing and pulling it back after reloading. The attached PU sniper scope has a fine cross reticle, instead of the German number 1 or 4 reticles that were also used by the Soviet faction. The PPSH-41 lacks a mag release and fire selector. The drum magazine should have an ammo capacity of 71, but only contains 46 rounds in game. The bolt is always stuck closed when firing and doing the motion to pull it back. The rate of fire of the PPSH-41 is also way too slow. This is what the game presents. Versus reality. The RDG-1 smoke grenade is actually just a retextured American M18 smoke grenade. This is what an actual RDG-1 looks like. The markings on these RDG-1 wannabes are not even correct. Aside from the fact that it should be in Russian Cyrillic, designation was only applied retroactively once the RDG-2 smoke grenade entered service in the 1950s. They also emit an orange smoke, when these grenades only came with white or black smoke variations in reality. The game sees us fight around what it calls the Chancellery building. This is obviously based on the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, particularly the new Reich Chancellery section. However, it and the layout of the rest of the city is completely fictionalized and does not match with the real Berlin at all. The Battle of Berlin as a whole was one of the largest and bloodiest of World War II. It saw hundreds of thousands of German soldiers defending against millions of Soviets. Medal of Honor Allied Assault Spearhead decides to depict this by having our American sergeant spend almost the entire chapter completely by himself, without Soviet support, clearing a large part of the city's center of German resistance. Again, technical limitations do come into play with some of these points, but this depiction is so ridiculously lacking and wrong regardless. During this battle, the ruined city of Berlin was still filled with millions of civilians trapped inside, yet none of them are seen anywhere. We face a scattered enemy force consisting of both Heer and SS soldiers. The Reich Chancellery sector in particular was defended by a much larger force of Kampfgruppe Munke, which consisted mostly of SS Leibstandarte soldiers. We should also see remnants of the foreign volunteers of the 11th SS Panzergrenadier Division Nordland, and perhaps some Volkssturm too. There should not be as many regular Heer forces here as the game shows. Most of the SS soldiers we come across are wearing .44 camo M43 uniforms that are missing the SS Eagle on the left sleeve. The soldiers also wear the reused green helmets with Heer decals instead of the SS ones. We encounter Panzer crewmen that are for some reason outside their tanks and are all armed with Kart 98K rifles. The cramped interiors of tanks meant that the crews would only have smaller pistols and SMGs as personal weapons. The black Panzer Trooper uniform incorrectly has white infantry piping or Waffenfarbe instead of the tanker pink. The breast eagle and collar tabs on the tunic indicated as being a Heer one, but the field cap has an SS Totenkopf on it. And said field cap is also missing the eagle. Despite the Soviets also never adopting such a thing, we continue to use the fictional Saving Private Ryan inspired sticky bombs on the vehicles. This time around, the rainfall causes the fuses to extinguish, so we have to just shoot them once to cause an explosion. Proper Hollywood logic this is. We also have to steal more of these explosives from the Germans, and later see them even sticking them to a Soviet tank. There was a German experimental sticky bomb made by Vosloo Verka, but that's about it. A standard German anti-tank launcher such as the Panzerfaust, or grenade like the regular Haftladung should have been given to them instead. When we arrive at the out-of-place crashed American aircraft, we see it is, rather ridiculously, a Piper J-3 Cub recon plane that still has its Normandy D-Day invasion stripes on the wings. I think we're well past that operation by now. Instead of having proper army observation pilot clothing, the plane's pilot is wearing standard infantry gear over an M41 uniform, the tunic and gaiters of which are for some reason recolored to green. In the Chancellery building are SS guards wearing black attire. These guards are likely supposed to represent the Reichskanzlei guards and maybe also the Allgemeine SS or regular SS. Their M32 black uniforms began to be phased out in 1942 and were mostly replaced by the regular SS field uniforms. Although used by some, the black uniforms shouldn't be as common anymore. It is not even a good recreation of the M32 either, as it is mostly just a black retextured M42 uniform with the Heer breast eagles still there and all. Their collar tabs show them having the rank of Untersturmführer, but they are missing the corresponding shoulder boards. And all of the SS title cuffs are completely blank. Their headgear consists of darkened Stahlhelms that once again feature Heer decals instead of the SS ones. We also find these other SS officers. We know from the base game that they are supposed to be Gestapo agents, which would explain the lack of SS runes on their collar insignia, but they should still have their rank on the left one. Their greatcoat has the Heer eagle instead of the SS one, and they are wearing the Heer visor cap instead of the SS one. Germans show up in a presumably captured T-34-76 tank, though it was not repainted or given any German insignia to prevent friendly fire. In fact, it even has Russian Cyrillic inscriptions on it. Barnes steals the Soviet T-34, somehow knows how to perfectly operate it, and does so outright impossibly by himself. Yeah, whatever. Once we start driving, a DTM-44 spawns on the roof. This was the standard hull machine gun of the T-34. Although there were Soviet tanks that you would find having roof-mounted DT machine guns, the T-34 was not one of them during World War II. The DTM-44's magazine has a texture on top that resembles the DP-27 magazine instead of the actual DTM magazine. The T-34 could carry a maximum of 77 rounds, although only 9 rounds were considered ready ammo that were in a special quick access rack beside the gun, because, video game, we fired a cannon and mounted MG endlessly with a consistent fire rate.
There's a Panzer division trying to flank our position.
The only full-on Panzer division in the battle within Berlin was the Panzer Division Müncheberg, with the rest of the German armour in the city being attached to other units such as the 11th SS Nordland and 18th Panzer Grenadier Division. The remaining vehicles of these units were mostly scattered around the place, surrounded and busy defending their corresponding sectors, until the breakout attempts that happened later between the night of May 1st and 2nd. None of them regrouped entirely to attack some specific target like this. An entire Panzer Division flanking a couple of bridges would be very excessive, and is just a game throwing around imposing terminology again. We meet an invincible Tiger tank that can only be eliminated by destroying the bridge it's on. Subsequently, a Soviet Yak fighter comes to blow up the second bridge. This makes no sense. The Soviets absolutely did not destroy any bridges in the city, as they needed any and all river and canal crossing points for their advance. We finally encounter some more Soviet soldiers, but there are only 3 of them, and they are all junior lieutenant officers in their parade dresses, instead of the more widespread enlisted and NCO ranks. They are also erroneously armed. One uses a German Walter P-38. While yes, you could argue that it is captured or looted as a war trophy, such an officer would more than likely just use a Soviet sidearm like the TT-33 when in an actual combat situation. If anyone would be a considerable user of stolen or captured firearms in this battle, it would be the ill-equipped Germans. Even in previous engagements on the Eastern Front, the Germans were known to have quite commonly used captured Soviet weapons, especially the PPSH-41. In fact, the Wehrmacht even had a project to modify captured PPSH-41s to fire the same rounds as the MP-40, known as the MP-41-OR. Another Soviet has this game's badly recreated model of an American M1 bazooka. Although the Red Army did acquire 3,000 bazookas from the Land-Lease Act, they never went into combat as they were considered inefficient. An anti-tank rifle like the PTRS-41 or anti-tank grenade like the RPG-43 would be more appropriate. And the final Soviet is wielding an American BAR, which was not even a part of the Land-Lease program. The DP-27 would be a better alternative. A couple more Soviet tanks arrive, but they are both the exact same model of T-34-76 as our one. Although still present in Berlin, this tank was well outdated and vastly replaced by the larger turreted 85mm variant. Aside from T-34s, the game also lacks any other type of Soviet armor that were commonly used, like the IS-2 and tank destroyers such as the Su-76, ISU-152, Su-85M, and Su-100. The same goes for the German faction, which continues to only use Panzer IVs and some Tiger 1s. In reality, apart from these 2 tanks, there were various other armoured vehicles used, including Panthers, Tiger 2s, Stugs, Herzers, and so on. Some of the vehicles we listed are even included in a few of the expansion's loading screen artworks, but never show up in the gameplay.
Get back here ASAP.
The acromization of as soon as possible to ASAP was not coined or popularized until the 1950s. The camera view pans out, giving us a better look at our T-34. For some reason, the turret is a lot further back, nearly over the engine deck. No T-34 looks like this. Soviet PE-8 bombers appear over the city. There should be no bombers over Berlin at this stage. The last Soviet bombing raid of the city was on April 26th. The mission's ending statistic states our preferred weapon is an 88mm tank gun, but we were on a T-34-76, which as its name suggests was equipped with a 76mm gun, not 88mm. The ending screen of the chapter, and later in the credits, show what is almost certainly meant to represent the famous stage photographs of Soviet soldiers hoisting their flag on the eastern side of the Reichstag rooftop on May 2nd, 1945. There are a couple of inaccuracies in the game's depiction though. First, it is showing them hoisting the stage flag on the western side of the Reichstag's rooftop, and second is the third soldier that was involved, as seen in the actual photographs, is standing too far away from the other two, and he is outright removed in the end credits section. And so we are left with over 240 historical inaccuracies. For more, click on this video covering this expansion's base game, Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Massive thanks to our researchers Davidson, K-Nyne, Michael Akkerman, AlwaysAFK and FeReise for their integral work in making this video possible. And of course, thank you for watching and supporting the channel. This has been the Frosty One, out.